Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and whatever, just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. Be a part of the show by calling 915-544-KTSM. 915-544-5876. Or comment online on our stream at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. It's 4 p.m. Mountain Time, and that means it's time to talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. However you may be tuning in here, letting us know what you have to say and what you want to think. Of course, over on the social media, as Bida Beza Gardner's already demonstrating there, hello to you as well. You got the best ways to do it. Whatever works best for you is the best, that is. Be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or over on our various social media pages. Again, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Lots to get to today. We have got quite a lot going on, including a lot of developing and ongoing situations involving the whole border security and immigration issues that we have been dealing with very locally lately, but of course do stretch border-wide. Don't want to lose sight of that, but still, a lot more to get into today. New numbers out and new conversations as well. Of course, we did have the visit to the area by Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, yesterday, speaking only with a select couple of outlets in town, but still some takeaways and further discussion about kind of what happens next, what plan there is, planned kind of in. Okay, I didn't actually use air quotes, but I think it was pretty heavily implied that I kind of wanted to there because, well, we got a couple of clips from that there. I mean, definitely encourage people to go listen to the whole interview that aired, including some of the other local resources on, yes, other radio stations, but the Texas Standard earlier today, very illuminating in its own right. So we'll certainly discuss that as, well, we definitely do. One of the purposes on this show. So new stuff going on with that, including some new state-level efforts. Maybe not totally in response to El Paso. Well, El Paso definitely comes up, and that's going to be the subject of including some of those stories coming up from our news partners there at KFOX 14 tonight. And so, of course, as we do most Wednesdays, do have a conversation with the Stephania Seifert, investigative reporter with the same, in order to talk about, some things also going on with those elections. Yeah, I know I haven't screamed about that enough lately, as well as some of those other, again, statewide, other border security and immigration-related issues. So, busy one for you today, as we also have Monica Cervantes. Hola to you as well, as we delve into another busy day. Just breaking down some of the numbers here. If you're at all slightly confused, if you check mildly religiously like I do, the Migrant Situational Awareness Dashboard at elpasotexas.gov/migrant-crisis. I'm not sure if they changed the title of that here because I thought it was the Migrant Crisis Dashboard, but in any case, that's still the URL they're using. We are looking at reported out by, again, the city of El Paso from CBP that there have been so far, 3,407 releases in the community, and that there have actually been in custody upwards of 5,143 to be exact, with encounters on the rolling 7-day average, 2,373. That more or less tracks with some of the other data coming out, being reported on nationally, about there being roughly 2,500 each day so far crossing the border here in El Paso, waiting across the Rio Grande, and then presenting themselves to or being intercepted by federal authorities for the most part. But of course, the federal part of it is not where that story ends. It often ends up then on the streets of El Paso and with other organizations, some busing already occurring. Now, I want to make a stark distinction between what has previously happened with the city of El Paso efforts and what has been, well, pretty much ongoing ever since I started reporting on this better part of a decade or more ago, of essentially individual efforts or organizational efforts to bust people out of the region, because that has been pretty much the modus operandi for quite a long time now. And as we still see those situations evolving, again, we did have the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, in town yesterday, unfortunately not speaking very directly out there. I mean, he made a couple of statements and had some conversation with organizations, but in terms of stuff that we can report on here, or that actually was able to be questions asked for him by particularly other local organizations, not too much. But if you tuned in or the news junkie set like I am to some of the other reporting going on, not just across town, but across the state, Texas Standard had a very interesting set of interviews involving local journalist and over at KTEP, Angela Kocherga, asking a few very specific questions, running to about 8 minutes and able to play. Now, I would love to play all of that for you, but unfortunately, we're not them, but there were a couple of specific points I wanted to make coming out of that, because let's just say how we got here is definitely an important question, and how we get out of it is another pressing one, with all these questions involving the end of Title 42, with the situation and the total numbers of that, and RJ asking, saying, what can he say seriously? So we have a couple of clips from that interview as aired earlier today that are very, very relevant, including about essentially how we got here. So this is Alejandro Mayorkas, again, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, speaking with a journalist from KTEP and the El Paso Times yesterday.
So we've been preparing since late last year for the end of Title 42. I think it was in April of this year that we published an outline of all of our planning to give confidence to the American public that we indeed will be prepared for the end of Title 42. That's what we do in the Department of Homeland Security. We are operational. We prepare for different scenarios and execute accordingly. Yesterday, of course, El Paso experienced a very significant influx by essentially caravan of buses, and we've been working immediately thereafter with our partners to the south, with Mexico, to ensure that doesn't happen again.
I gotta say, if this has been a plan been coming into place since earlier, as well as have Robbie Flores, wave over to you there as well, joining us here. If this has been the result of a plan, I'd hate to see what it looks like when we don't have a plan. I mean, I don't know if I totally buy that idea that this is all according to plan, because if this is a plan, I gotta say, I would like to see what plan B is, because the idea of this just being kind of taken on the chin, particularly by this community, is not one I'm going to call the best. I think that if this was the plan, we need to go well back to that drawing board here. Now, again, like I said, I'd love to play just this whole damn interview for you, but a couple other specific points that I do want to make from it, including what the actual expectation is from Mayorkas for what will be happening next week. The idea of what will happen on that Wednesday, just over a week, exactly a week from today, on what the plan is, or what the expectation is with that actual end. I mean, all of this has been in the lead up to and very much in anticipation of the end of Title 42. Other local reporting, including from Angela Kocherga there at KTEP, about with individuals about saying they didn't want to wait for Title 42, those kind of things. So, and I mean, there's some other expectations going on in the comments there. I'm going to hold off on that, but this is what he said about the expectation for actually late next Wednesday and what we should see what's in the area.
I think, what we do is we plan for what might occur, and we really develop different plans for different scenarios, and rather than be too predictive, because it's so difficult to understand, so difficult to predict, we just prepare for different options.
Yeah, I'm going to call that one maybe not too confidence building either. I mean, I would love to see something concrete, some policy come out, but as much as, Title 42 being rightly referred to as kind of the de facto last remaining responsive policy that is in place at this point in time, as opposed to, Mayorkas did also go in the interview to talk about and be questioned about the fact that there hasn't been really new immigration laws passed in the last 40 years. But here was the question that was one of the more pressing ones around here about kind of what to do about the human situation coming out of this. Laws aside, with a question being asked about could something be set up similar to what happened during the Afghan airlift when we were dealing with, hundreds and thousands of people need to be housed all of the sudden here. And here's what he had to say.
No decision has been made. We're looking at a whole host of things. One of the options that, of course, we're taking a look at is the success with our program for Venezuelans that was built on our success for Ukrainians. How can we build a lawful pathway for individuals so that they don't have to traverse dangerous terrain in the hands of smugglers, but rather we can pre-qualify them, if you will. We can vet and screen them beforehand, assess their eligibility, and then have them travel safely to the United States, to ports of entry in the interior by plane, which is what we've seen in a tremendously successful program for Venezuelans.
So I guess some allusions to what has been talked about previously, both on our airwaves and by some local elected officials, about the idea of processing out of country. I don't know if that can be done. Frankly, it's been talked about as being passed as a potential law, but it can be done just by executive orders, what it would take, or departmental policy. That's a larger question that I would like to know a more definitive answer to, because yeah, we got RJ saying here, not necessarily liking the predictive power as mentioned there, saying my 12-year-old neighbor can predict the increase that we can probably expect next Wednesday here. I mean, that is a firm this all is, as much as we have been seeing quite the influx, as the phrase was used here, probably a lot more. I mean, this is all prelude to next Wednesday at the moment. So again, a couple of possibilities there about maybe new policy coming out, or maybe even a stay of the removal of it with the court cases proceeding. But let me just say this, that even if something were to be put into place, like suddenly, or even now, we're 1 week out, I don't think that is going to have nearly as much impact as, well, the situation is going to evolve from. I mean, all of these expectations have already been in place. I mean, we've had people talking about this since earlier, even this month, when there were, say, what we talked about previously, the raid by Mexican authorities on some of those riverbank camps, etc. And they were already talking about just wait for the end of Title 42. So there's already a firm expectation in place about what will be happening at that point. Again, December 21st, the day we are talking about. So even if new policy is put into place, even if it is stayed, I think that is not going to stop necessarily what is going on here. So I think that the most important thing that'll be probably should be pushed for is about more resources and more responsiveness to this. Otherwise, we're going to see a further outstripping of local and locally based resources to this here, and a lot more conversation going on there. Those are not the only things going on today. I wanted to bring up those couple of clips from, again, when Mayorkas was in town yesterday. So he was speaking when he said, in the previous day, speaking about the start of this week, and a lot of conversation going on from Ion Grimm, Ed Clore, RJ, and a whole lot more. So there's more to talk about here, including what some of the state level response is, including a letter sent by Texas Governor Greg Abbott to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton calling for investigations related to this into particularly local organizations. Now, we're going to be previewing what is going to be coming up on our local airwaves tonight from our news partners there at KFOX 14. But also, we got elections going on. So no, it's not all immigration all the time, even though I dare y'all to point out to a bigger story happening locally and affecting our region right at this moment. Would love to hear your perspective on that, and we'll get to the phone lines later so we can bring that up as we usually do. But in the meantime, we are definitely going to be talking more about this, and again, speaking with and visiting with our news partners there at KFOX 14 and Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with the same. And now we got to take that first break of this hour, so a lot more comments coming in. Keep them going as they're relevant to the conversations. We'll pop them up during this upcoming interview, but in any case, stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Quite the show for you today and a whole lot more to go, so stay locked in. News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
Traffic is still stop and go in the East Valley on Loop 375 northbound after a crash at Iron Medics earlier, now moved off to the left shoulder. You can expect a 24-minute backup to Montana Avenue. George Dieter northbound before Pebble Hills, an injury accident and a crash with injuries. Red at Wrestler with police and fire on the scene. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by the Our American Stories podcast.
Whether it's freshly cut, bought at a nursery, or just unboxed from Home Depot, putting up a Christmas tree is just commonplace this time of year. But why do we haul an evergreen into our living room? Be sure to catch this week's edition of Our American Stories on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Help the planet with a tip from iHeartRadio Earth. Education doesn't just take place in the classroom. There are many ways for children of all ages to learn about sustainability and environmental education at home. Visit iHeartRadio.com/Earth for a list of resources, activity guides, and toolkits that are educational and fun for the whole family. Brought to you by iHeartRadio Earth and the National Environmental Education Foundation. To find more tips for smarter, sustainable living, or to take action in your own community, go to iHeartRadio.com/Earth.
Want to get 7 streaming services for the price of 1? Sign up for a smart bundle that'll stimulate your brain. Featuring Curiosity Stream with the best documentary films and TV shows. Nebula for thought-provoking content from your favorite creators. And One Day University with the best lectures from the country's top professors. And so much more. It's perfect for families with all kinds of interests and great content for kids. It also makes a perfect holiday gift. Now at 40% off, get all 7 services for only $3.50 a month. Sign up now at smartbundle.com.
A construction site is a noisy place where things can be misinterpreted. We need to redo the drywall. It can sound a lot like,
rewire the hull? They're firing, Paul.
Wait, what did I do? Or even,
install a waterfall. Whose dumb idea was this?
Be on the same page at every stage with Autodesk. From the designers to the field crew to the owner of the finished building. Autodesk Construction Cloud gives everyone clarity. Now, how about that drywall?
Testosterone levels are at an all-time low. Individual T levels decline 1% every year. Chalk, CHOQ, is the new champion of natural testosterone boosters. Chalk's main ingredient is clinically studied to naturally boost testosterone 20% in 90 days. Supercharge your masculinity and boost your daily energy with Chalk's Male Vitality Stack. For a limited time, our listeners will get 30% off at CHOQ.com with promo code USA. CHOQ.com, code USA.
Freedom of speech lives here.
To me, freedom of speech is being able to say anything you want.
El Paso's News Radio. 690 KTSM. News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, more or less the main one where most of the comments happen anyway, and where the Thunderdome definitely develops more or less every day. So if you want to wade in there, forewarned, forearmed. But in any case, a lot of people chiming in there. We'll talk about more on those comments here as well as pop some up right now. But joining us right now, as we have on most Wednesdays, we do have Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely happy to talk with you here. Lots going on these last couple of weeks here. I feel like I do say that a lot, but just kind of amp it up to 11 with all the things that are going on here. Certainly going to be talking more about the immigration situation and some of those specific responses here, but of course wanted to delve a little bit more into your in-depth reporting. Now, we were able to check in with you last week via phone while you were out of town about some of the things that were, well, coming up, and a lot more, because in the midst of all the other stories we've been talking about here, we still do have that runoff election still progressing at this moment. Now, of course, early voting is over, ended yesterday, but election day for the final deciding factor of it here coming up this Saturday, and you've been filing a couple of different stories on, well, at least a couple of those runoff race is primarily focused on District 1 and District 6.
Yes. So as you mentioned, the runoff will be for districts 1, 6, and 8.
Mm-hmm.
The story that we had for last Wednesday was with regards to District 6.
Mm-hmm.
There were 3 ethics complaints that were filed against El Paso City Rep Claudia Rodriguez, who's running in the re-election against Art Fierro for that district.
Right.
And so these ethics complaints were filed by Arnulfo Hernandez. He's an El Pasoan who had left El Paso to practice law in California for more than 40 years, came back to El Paso, and just started looking into not just specifically for this district, which is his district, but all
Right.
of the campaign finance reports for the candidates in this runoff. And he says that he noticed there were some irregularities in the campaign finance reports that were filed by Claudia Rodriguez. He says some of them had to do with not providing the information that is required. So there were names and there was the donation amount, but it didn't include addresses. And things of that sort. And so he also said that he noticed that there were corrections made to campaign finance reports, which then did not have the same information as the first campaign finance report. And so he ended up filing 3 ethics complaints with the Texas Ethics Commission against Claudia Rodriguez. When we spoke with Claudia Rodriguez and asked her about these complaints, she told us that they were going to be dismissed December 13th, that they had been resolved and that she would get the dismissal paperwork December 13th and that she would share it with us. When we had reached out with the Texas Ethics Commission to confirm all of this, they told us that they are not allowed to speak on these types of matters. It's not public information. And the only way that we would be able to get any resolution, if there was any, would be through the person who it was filed against. So in this case, it would be Claudia Rodriguez. And so we reached back out to her yesterday because yesterday was December 13th when she said that she would get the dismissal paperwork, but we have yet to hear back. So that's where that stands right now, is that there, as far as we know, there is no resolution to these ethics complaints that have been filed. I also reached out to the lawyer who had filed them, and he said that he hadn't gotten any word from the Texas Ethics Commission either. So that's still something that we're keeping an eye on for sure.
So, like, as far as the indication you have, no firm resolution yet, but still seems to be pending on what the Texas Ethics Commission is putting out, but it'll still have to come through, well, Claudia Lizette Rodriguez in this case.
Yes.
And it's worth also noting here, as just in the progression of the story, that the person filing these claims has previously run against Rodriguez here, Arnulfo Hernandez, as we're talking about here, not in this election cycle, but in previous ones.
Yes, and the one that Claudia ended up winning, he did run. He was one of the opponents for Claudia Rodriguez, and so yes, it's that same person. If the name sounds familiar, it is because we have seen his name out there before, especially for this race.
Yeah, particularly again, specifically for District 6, 2019, that last time here. Not on the ballot this time around, that individual, Hernandez, but still an interesting one. And you've got the documentation that is in question here extensively posted over on the story as well. I mean, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different sets of documents involved here, both in the filings of the complaints as well as the supporting documentation about pointing out what are called to be the errors, essentially, or the sources of the complaint.
Right. Yes. So what you'll see are the campaign finance reports that were submitted by Claudia Rodriguez, as well as the ethics complaints that were filed by Arnulfo Hernandez to the Texas Ethics Commission.
So again, if you want to see that, go, of course, check out kfoxtv.com and click under the KFOX 14 Investigates tab. Of course, joining us here in studio right now is Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with the same. So all of the reports, you can find that she has filed on these and other subjects that we have also previously discussed. Again, kfoxtv.com, and then click under the KFOX 14 Investigates tab. So that's the one that we kind of previewed last week, definitely relevant for this again, still ongoing election, upcoming election day now with actual early voting done. And just as a reminder, because I would hate myself if I didn't mention it, very low voter turnout so far in this case here. As of yesterday, we're just about, if you include the mail-in ballots returned so far, 3.5, 3 and change % here. So not great. So if you live in this or any of the other districts, again, 1, 8, and 6, not the numerical order, but that's the kind of geographic order if you go from west to east across the county. make sure you go out and vote in those here. And of course, you have more that have also been filed on this, and specifically also a lot of focus on District 1 that you are bringing up.
Right. So District 1 has been held by Peter Schwartzbein since 2014, I want to say.
He's termed out in any case
he's termed out, and this is why this particular race garnered so much attention. There were 7 candidates on the ballot for this race. The runoff is between Analisa Cordova Silverstein and Brian Kennedy. And so we have noticed a bit of a change in how these campaigns have gone about, especially for the runoff. There's a bit of, claims of mudslinging in this campaign. And so I did speak with both candidates about this. There's particularly a mailer that has gone out from Analisa Cordova Silverstein's campaign. Talking about Brian Kennedy, and there's several claims listed on there. And so I asked her about that, and I also asked him to address that, what's being said. And so that's what that report was about, clearing up what is being said on both sides. I think when I asked her, have you changed your campaign strategy from the general election to the runoff? She said, yes, I'm focusing more on educating voters on my opponent, on what his history or what he stands for, and then reinforcing her platform, whereas Brian Kennedy says that he's just focusing strictly on the issues which he thinks are important. And so that's I guess a little bit of a change from what maybe people saw in the general election. Brian Kennedy points out that the candidates who didn't make it to the runoff for that district have endorsed him. And she goes into detail about this mailer, which I'm going to pull up just to explain some of the claims that are on here. It talks about how much Brian Kennedy earned managing the budget for the El Paso Sports Commission. It talks about an audit where it's saying that Kennedy allegedly misused funds, hotel motel tax funds between 2010, I believe, and 2018. And also that Kennedy would, if elected, would have this as a part-time job, not a full-time job, where Analisa Cordova says that she would be doing this. She would be representing El Paso full-time. And so I brought all of these claims to Brian Kennedy. And he says there's a bit of confusion with what the sports commission is. It is not a county entity. It is subcontracted by the county. So he has never been a county employee. And so that's where he says, those claims aren't accurate, because I'm not the highest paid county employee. I'm not even a county employee to begin with. The sports commission is its own, private, entity, if you will, that is subcontracted by the county to basically run sports and entertainment at the Coliseum. And he compares it to Destination El Paso for the city, which runs the city's visitors bureau at the convention center. And as far as there was an audit that was in question in these mailers about how hotel motel tax funds were used. And he cleared that up as well, saying that it was a matter of different auditors at the time. There had been a change in auditors where one auditor had said, yeah, we can use this type of money to fund this. And a new auditor came in and said, no, we need to use, if we're going to be funding this, it needs to come out of this fund, not that fund. And so he says that the money was returned. There was no money that was misused, according to Kennedy. And as far as the part-time claims, he says that he never said he was going to be part-time. He just said that he was not going to be exclusive. He still has his private law firm, and he still intends to continue, practicing law even while representing if he is elected. And so you can hear from both sides on these claims. I think this story was a little different from what we've seen as far as typically we've been doing stories on, what are the issues that they, they stand for? What are their top priorities? And I think this one was more so
focus,
them, like clearing the air, if you will, of what's been going out there. Just because both sides have said that what's been put out there isn't totally accurate. Kennedy had said, Analisa Cordova Silverstein won't debate me. And so I asked her about that, and she said that she had taken part in several forums, and she just felt like that was exhausted at this point.
So a lot of back and forth here. I've gotten all of these mailers we've talked about here because I now live in District 1. And so it's been interesting to see the back and forth here. The part that I guess really caught my eye among all of these here was the whole idea of the claim about part-time versus full-time El Paso City Council, because this has been kind of a conversation going on over, let's call it better part of decades at this point, because when I was doing more active, like going down to city council meetings regularly for reporting, there were a number of, at least one that stands out more than anything, Dr. No, from back in his day. People of a certain age and focusing on city council may recall him still maintaining a full medical practice at that point in time here. And I mean, others, Suarez Mine himself come to mind here as still being involved in other, outside pursuits, still maintaining other, business interests, more artistic and architectural, I want to say, in his case, photography based as well. So I think it would be interesting to see a breakdown of who currently on or recently on city council has considered themselves full-time versus still maintaining outside businesses, because among other things, it used to be that it was more or less wrote that El Paso City Council was considered a part-time position, particularly given the pay level that has existed previously. Of course, some of those formulas has changed, which is why I think it would be maybe interesting in the future to get back into, okay, how is it actually considered? Is it still by rote considered full-time or part-time? Because sure, whatever someone wants to take on to it is, their prerogative, but what it's actually defined as would be another thing in my mind.
Right. And so, I typically file open records requests for salaries for city employees. I typically do that every year.
Right.
Just, something to keep an eye out for. It's public information. And so typically
Absolutely.
city representatives, in the last couple of years have made between 50,000 to 60,000, if not a little higher now. They're probably in no more than 65,000, I would say, based off of the open records that I've filed. The actual number doesn't come to mind right now. I don't have the documents in front of me, but it's funny you bring up that point about it was before seen as a part-time position where everyone on council seemed to typically have another a job, whether it was full-time or part-time, aside from also being a city representative. So interesting that you bring that up as well.
Yeah, because it used to be that they would have to be each time approved by voters here, which no scientific thing I can point to here. I feel like more often than not would not be approved. When again, that was one of the more interesting juxtapositions between the city and the county here, because there are differences in how the charters and the very base duties are laid out there, different powers at play. So as much as there may have been conversations or consternation with, say, county commissioner's salary, it's how it's set up now that it is for city council and the mayor based on a formula, essentially a base level of the, for lack of a better term, GDP of El Paso, or what each household income is. So it's still kind of tied to a how is El Paso doing, but that's why it hasn't come up on the ballot within the last, ever since that was passed, because it's now a formula. So it can go up or down, has trended more or less upwards in that time here, but is still not, it's nowhere near it's not the six figures that we're seeing in some of the other either city positions or, say, the elected official positions within the county.
Right. And as you mentioned, the big difference between what city representatives make and what county commissioners make.
Absolutely here. So again, guest right now with us is, of course, Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. We got more to talk about here, and including stories that we have got coming up tonight, including more on the immigration stuff. So we got to get that into that in the next segment here, but got to take that next break. So coming out of this break, sticking around with Stephanie here, talking more about those and some of those ongoing issues and what you can expect coming up, and more reporting on that. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Got us cut out of that pre-recorded interview here real quick, because there is a bit of breaking news going on while we're on air here right now. That one of those big questions that we've been wondering about what is going to be happening with the district attorney position in El Paso. Governor Greg Abbott, during our program here today, has sent out a release announcing that Bill Hicks will be the district attorney of El Paso, the 34th Judicial District, covering, of course, Culberson, Hudspeth, and El Paso counties, effective 5 p.m. today, December 14th. So we'll have a lot more talk about that. We're going to be continuing after this break with our interview with Stephanie Seifert. But again, a new district attorney now appointed for El Paso. That's definitely something we will be discussing here. RJ also commenting on that. Do appreciate that. But back after this next break, continuing our discussion with Stephanie Seifert. And don't worry, we'll talk about this breaking news as well. Stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Stay tuned.
Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update. 3 people were seriously hurt today after a Sun Metro bus collided with a car. The crash left the bus resting on its side on Gateway South at Yandell. Traffic was diverted to Tularosa around the wreckage and emergency situation. El Paso police report 3 people went to the hospital but didn't say in which vehicle they were riding. The Texas Department of Public Safety will begin to conduct random commercial vehicle safety inspections at the ports of entry along the border. DPS made that announcement yesterday, and officials say the inspections will be done at random on the commercial vehicles as they cross into Texas. The governor had ordered the inspections before in April that instructed DPS to increase inspections for all commercial vehicles coming into the country. And passenger flights will resume at Las Cruces International Airport for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Advanced Airlines will offer passenger air service from Las Cruces to Albuquerque starting January 16th. I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update.
News Radio 690. Traffic all day.
From the CBS 4 Warm Weather Center, I'm forecaster Vania Castillo. Well, we are in for a much colder day here in the borderland, looking at a high of 50 degrees in El Paso, 47 in Las Cruces, as we did see a cold front move in yesterday. We are going to also be seeing that 20% chance for rain sticking around throughout the rest of the day. By tonight, most of that rain does make its way out of the area. We are, though, going to be replacing it with some wind. Expect 20 to 25 mile per hour winds with gusts of up to 35 miles per hour.
This report is sponsored by Discover. Some banks can make it complicated to redeem credit card rewards, but with Discover, you can redeem your rewards for cash in any amount at any time. Talk about amazing. Learn more at discover.com/redeem rewards. Terms apply.
Hey, El Paso, Ivan Ochoa, General Manager from Sunland Park Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Fiat. The Christmas season is here, and this is our gift to you. We're offering our biggest discounts of the year on every new and certified pre-owned vehicle in our huge inventory.
Get our biggest discounts of the year and exceptional trade-in values during the Big Finish sales event at Sunland Park Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram Fiat. For a limited time, get $5,000 below MSRP and super low 4.9% APR for 72 months on new 2022 Ram 1500 Lone Star models. $5,750 below MSRP on new 2022 Durango SUVs. $4,000 off new 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokees. All with no payments for 90 days. Worried about your trade or credit? Don't sweat it. Our lenders will push to approve your credit, even if your credit is less than perfect. All military personnel and first responders receive an additional discount. Thank you for your service. Trade and upgrade for less at Sunland Park Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Fiat. Where buying a car is fun at I-10 at Sunland Park Drive or online at sunlandparkdodge.com. Estamos en tu esquina, El Paso. El Paso Strong. Includes factory rebate and dealer discount plus TTNL. 4.9% APR, 1606 per thousand finance on select vehicles with approved credit. Offers not combined.
For the local issues and discussion you won't get anywhere else, turn to Talk El Paso. Weekdays at 4 right here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Brought to you in part by the El Paso Community Foundation. Sound off on what matters to you. Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. And let's talk El Paso.
Make your holidays more merry. Adopt a pet during Petco Loves Texas Mega Adoption Event at participating animal shelters and Petco stores this weekend. Even merrier, all adoption fees are waived. Visit mega-texas.com to adopt a pet. This report is sponsored by Petco Love. Add the love of a pet at mega-texas.com.
Because you never hear this.
Hey, hon, I'm late.
Chris, I am so pleased you missed the beginning of our meeting.
Thanks for making me wait, Dad. I talked to a lot of strangers.
Check on your commute. Stay informed. Traffic and weather all day. Or you might never hear the end of it.
Well, you were late to our anniversary dinner that one time.
Yes, how could I forget?
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM. El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Welcome back here to Talk El Paso, airing on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. All you really need to know is whatever place works best for you. Looking for a new home or a place to get at us better, figure out which one of those works best for you, but whatever ends up being the best place, the easiest, most accessible, is the best place for you as we continue our mission to have live local talk radio here in the borderland and talk about the issues that affect us here, because no one else is going to like the way we do, the ones affected by it and those kind of things here. So to help us focus more on that, continue our conversation here with Estefania Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partner there at KFOX 14. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely happy to have you on, because amongst the other things, I mean, elections are important and certainly a good one. And we did answer one of those questions we had coming out of the last segments that, that is tied to mayor and city council's top pay is tied to the median household income in El Paso, with representatives at the median household income and the mayor at 1.5 times that. So did figure out that answer to that question. But stuff going on as of right now and still developing probably as of this moment, even as we're recording and or airing on this, including some significant changes going on to, well, some of the state level response to the current border security and immigration situation we are seeing here in El Paso. Of course, I've talked about this already today, but for anyone under that, again, large and particularly soundproof rock, we have had a lot of eyes on and focus on the borderland region, as we have been seeing thousands crossing the border daily at this point here, both, kind of starting very much with about 1,500 to 1,700 estimated on Sunday night into Monday morning, and about a couple thousand being estimated per day by DHS at this point. Of course, we had visits that we played some earlier of, and some comments from, DHS Secretary Mayorkas, and a lot more focuses happening along those ways. But the very interesting statements, we previously kind of commented on the fact that there hasn't been much state level involvement here in the borderland, here in El Paso, for a variety of reasons could be traced to that, and a couple of things we'll get into right now. But one of the more interesting things coming out from the governor's mansion today actually is a call for investigation into NGOs that the governor is saying, and is quoting as saying, aiding illegal crossings. And that's something that you all have been focusing on a bit today as well, right?
Yes. So NGOs are non-governmental organizations. Right. And what he announced today is that he sent a letter to the Texas Attorney General asking to look into, the possibility of these NGOs, like you said, aiding illegal crossings. And he specifically points to NGOs in El Paso. He talks about the recent reports of non-governmental organizations assisting with illegal border crossings in this particular news release, and he says that this is happening near El Paso. That's according to the letter that he sent to the Attorney General. And he just talks about how with the end of Title 42, very, very near, that they're expecting a dramatic increase in the number of illegal crossings in this border. And so it's interesting. He sends this press release out in the morning, and we're already starting to see a little bit of the reaction from some of these NGOs in El Paso.
Right.
We have reached out to the main ones that I think are, pretty common to hear from here in El Paso, which is, Las Americas, Diocesan Migrant Refugee Services, the Annunciation House, Hope Border Institute, the Border Network for Human Rights, and trying to get their response to what the governor is saying, and the letter that he sent with calling for an investigation into these NGOs.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Particularly says he goes on in the letter part, the passive part that you quoted there. We further understand NGOs may be engaged in unlawfully orchestrating other border crossings through activities on both sides of the border, including in sectors other than El Paso. And again, sending that letter to the Texas Attorney General's office to initiate an investigation. So again, essentially allegations at this point being made. So you are in the process as we're recording this, and then will be part of your reporting this evening and tonight on reaching out to those organizations to get essentially their responses and kind of what comes next there. So what are some of the big questions that you're looking to get answered at this point from those, again, a lot of locally based organizations?
Right. So from what we're seeing right now, the Hope Border Institute did go to Twitter with this, saying that this is a threat. They tweeted the governor's press release saying that this is meant to intimidate communities on the front line, providing hospitality for vulnerable migrants, working for immigration reform, and working collectively for real solutions at the border. Serious questions of abuse of office and religious liberty raised here is what the tweet from the Hope Border Institute says with regards to the governor's press release. And so this is just one of the NGOs which we had reached out to, and we're still hearing and waiting to hear from others on their response, just particularly because it does call out El Paso NGOs, and
Very
so
specifically.
we're focusing on the ones who advocate for migrants, in particular, and reaching out to them and seeing what their comments are, what their thoughts are to this possible investigation.
So again, very preliminary, again, basically an allegation stage at this point here. We'll see what action, and it'll have probably be coming in the coming days, weeks, if not a couple of months here from, again, the Texas Attorney General's office. Very willing to essentially play ball with governor's requests in the past year. I mean, ever since and even leading up to the most recent election, Paxton was pretty well in lockstep with the governor's office here. So I don't think it would be unreasonable to expect that there will be some kind of response coming out of, again, the Texas Attorney General's office. What form that will actually take, what that'll look like, different questions to be answered there. Only time will tell in that kind of cases here. So it'll be very interesting to see what your reporting comes up with tonight on further responses and further, kind of what are next steps for these organizations based here locally. I do feel it's worthy to mention at this point in time that they're clearly on the Mexican side of things. I mean, there was literally video of the buses that were being brought into Juarez. So I think that'll probably be one of the bigger questions kind of being pointed at to, in a way, by the governor's release here about was there coordination essentially with those local organizations here. Obviously on the Mexican side, there was a coordinated way that this has unfolded up to this point here. I mean, among other things, it's been previously reported that those that have crossed most recently were given, temporary legal authorization in Mexico in order to essentially transit through. So I think that'll probably be the biggest question, again, of my temporary analysis here until we get further, more concrete answers coming from that. So that will be very interesting to see. And so that'll be on the upcoming newscast tonight, right?
Yes, I mean, this is so fluid. It's changing so constantly.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, we, of course, are keeping an eye on all of it, and you can catch it on our evening newscasts.
Absolutely there. So again, kfoxtv.com, where you can also find the web stories that'll be going along with it. Here, again, of course, joining us here in studio is Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Find this and her other stories, usually more, not quite on the immediate nature, a little bit more in-depth and like open records requests going into it here. Not quite a part of this here, since again this is so fluid and changing so rapidly. I am sure open records requests will come out of this eventually, but we're still kind of in the midst of it here right now. There might not even be the documentation existing yet to request. So you can catch that usually over kfoxtv.com and click under the KFOX 14 Investigates tab. In the meantime, while a lot of this is still developing, some more things that have been coming out it's yesterday that a lot of these things were made, including the visit from, again, DHS Secretary Mayorkas, but then also after the aftermath of meetings from certain El Paso elected officials with Mayorkas and other stakeholders. Some interesting statements coming out of it, particularly about this kind of one real stickler of an idea, the sticking point, I guess I should say, that has been about this idea of a disaster declaration. Some interesting responses coming from, local, let's call it city, county, and federal elected officials on these points.
Right. So typically we see disaster declarations when, there's a big natural disaster, or when there's a big, some sort of crisis somewhere. And so what it typically does is it opens up funding.
Right.
And I think that is why it's been brought up so much right now, is because there are people who are asking for the mayor and the county judge, who are the people who are allowed to call for, a disaster declaration or emergency declaration, to do so. And I think there's people who want that because they think that the extra funding that opens up is necessary. But then there are other people on the other side of that who don't think that the resources that are needed in El Paso right now would come from, declaring an emergency. So yes, we have heard from Congresswoman Veronica Escobar on this, from the mayor, and from the county judge on this particular question of, are you all going to, particularly for the mayor and the county judge, are you going to call, for an emergency declaration? And if not, why? I know that the county judge had mentioned that he wished there was a better relationship between El Paso and the governor. He said, I wish we had the type of communication that the governor has with other parts of, the border, such as, in Del Rio. I think also, there's that uncertainty of what resources would be opened up if they do declare that emergency, and who would be at the discretion of who. Would that be at the governor's discretion? Would
Mhm.
that be at the mayor or the county judge's discretion? I think those are all of the questions that are still we're still not sure about, and I think they're also in that same boat on how they feel about that.
Yeah, three specific quotes that I want to point out here, coming again from the mayor, county judge, and congresswoman for the area here. Specifically, the mayor has not necessarily ruled out the possibility of a disaster declaration. Speaking with y'all earlier, saying, quote, "I'm not ready to declare a state of emergency today. It doesn't mean that I am not looking at maybe doing it, making sure we do it the right way." Again, Oscar Leeser, mayor of El Paso, speaking there. And again, more to what you said with Samaniego, his quote saying, "Us not wanting to declare is we're concerned the minute we declare, we're not going to be able to choose our resources, and the governor can determine what those resources are." Again, quote there from Ricardo Samaniego, El Paso County Judge. And when it comes to Veronica Escobar, Congresswoman for El Paso, if it does not come with significant resources or added resources that could be useful, I guess my question be, what's the purpose? Again, there, Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, her direct quote. So kind of a few different positions, I guess, here. I mean, similar-ish, none of them necessarily immediately supportive of the idea of declaring a disaster, that specific declaration, but again, not necessarily totally ruling it out. But I guess to say the strongest response from my analysis here would be coming from the county judge, Ricardo Samaniego, again, specifically pointing out that relationship with the governor. And I want to further quote on him saying he pays attention to Del Rio and the areas that are more Republican areas as part of it. Also saying that the governor does not pay attention to El Paso as part of his analysis. So I'd say probably the strongest response of these three local elected officials relating to the situation in this circumstance.
Right, and then they also mentioned, in particular, Veronica Escobar and Ricardo Samaniego said they believe that Governor Abbott does not have El Paso's best interest in mind, and so, like I said, it's still very fresh and fluid every day, every minute. Things are changing with this, and so it could be that we get different responses later tonight, or maybe even tomorrow.
Right.
But at least as far as that question being thrown out there, that these were their responses. And I mean, you mentioned we had, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas in El Paso. We weren't able to interview him. There was only
Right.
a select group of media outlets that were allowed to take part in that. And so I think there's still a lot of questions, and we're still trying to get those answers. Even if we weren't immediately given that access, I mean, we're still trying on our end to get
course.
those questions answered.
Because there are a lot of questions, including what comes next, and even outside of this situation, including some of the overarching ones about what is going to happen with Title 42, and or will there be any replacement, anything on the same order of it, or what will be the new policies, or in this case, orders, since that's what all can be done. Not going to be laws passed by the time we get to this time next week. That much I feel pretty confident in saying. So we're looking at more executive orders at this point in time. So will be anything near Title 42 or on the order of it. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see on that. But in the meantime, yeah, this situation, fluid is a very good way to put it, because this has been changing in Protean almost entirely since over the weekend. So we're going to keep our eye on this here. And again, part of your reporting today. So focus a lot on some of those local circumstances, local responses today. But of course, you are usually focused, at least in every week kind of circumstance, on other investigative reporting that people can, help you dig into. So if people want to reach out to you, suggest things, or provide some information, what's the best way for them to do so?
They can find me on social media, or they can email me at eyseyffert@kfoxtv.com.
And of course, we'll post up those links on our social media as we usually do. But in any case, the Stephanie Seifert, investigative reporter with our news partners there at KFOX 14. Again, kfoxtv.com. Click under the KFOX 14 Investigates tab to find most of the previous stories here, and probably I'm going to say probably the one including tonight here, at the very least, over on the main website here. Thank you very much for coming in to join us here in studio, as we do most Wednesdays.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Absolutely happy to have you on. And with that, we'll go ahead and take that next break right now. So coming out of this break, we'll go ahead and open up those phone lines, as we usually do at this point as well. So that number to call, 915-544-5876, 915-544-KTSM. Back after this break with more Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
No major crashes on your El Paso freeways, just some slowing. I-10 eastbound from Trans Mountain to the Patriot. it's a 10-minute delay. Montana eastbound is slow. Trowbridge out to Lee Trevino, it's an 8-minute delay. Eastbound Liberty Expressway from the Gateway to the Loop, it's a 5-minute backup. And Sun Valley Drive east of Kenworthy, watch for an accident with police on the scene there. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Petco Love and the love of a pet at mega-texas.com. Make your holidays more merry. Adopt a pet during Petco Love's Texas Mega Adoption Event at participating animal shelters and Petco stores this weekend. Even merrier, all adoption fees are waived. Visit mega-texas.com to adopt a pet.
News on the hour and a half. Traffic and weather all day. News Radio 690 is KTSM AM El Paso, an iHeart radio station.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. Damage is being reported as severe weather pushes through the New Orleans area this afternoon. Tornado warnings were issued and damage was reported in several communities. Search and rescue efforts are underway in Arabi and St. Bernard Parish, where significant damage is being reported. The storms were part of a larger system that's bringing severe weather to parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. It's been 10 years since 26 students and staff were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut. Natalie Migliori reports.
According to Sandy Hook Promise, there have been 948 school shootings since December 14th, 2012. So have we learned anything?
Not much. What have they done since then?
President Biden signed a gun safety bill earlier this summer following the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, but said it didn't do everything he wanted. One father of 3 from New York says school is just different these days.
Horrifying to hear them have these drills at school and where to hide in the room.
I'm Natalie Migliori.
Wall Street is closing with stocks lower after the Federal Reserve announced another rate hike. The central bank raised rates by 0.5 percentage point, which was widely expected. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said more data was needed before the Fed would change its view of inflation. The Biden administration is working to strengthen relationships across Africa.
Partnerships not to create political obligation, not to or foster dependence, but to spur shared success and opportunity.
President Biden announced a wide range of investments and initiatives the U.S. is facilitating to fuel economic growth and job creation, both domestically and across the African continent. France is headed to the World Cup final after its 2-0 win over Morocco on Wednesday in Qatar. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
This report is sponsored by Petco Love and the love of a pet at mega-texas.com. Make your holidays more merry. Adopt a pet during Petco Love's Texas Mega Adoption Event at participating animal shelters and Petco stores this weekend. Even merrier, all adoption fees are waived. Visit mega-texas.com to adopt a pet.
Help the planet with a tip from iHeart Radio Earth. Water heating can account for up to 25% of the energy consumed in your home. Save money and energy and improve the comfort of your home by turning down the temperature of your water heater from 140 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It can save you up to 22% on your energy bill annually. Brought to you by iHeart Radio Earth and the National Environmental Education Foundation. To find more tips for smarter, sustainable living or to take action in your own community, go to iHeartRadio.com/Earth.
Mario Cordy Lopez here with a fresh breath tip for the holidays.
We all love the parties, friends and family, but up-close moments can be awkward.
Yeah, they can. Smart Mouth mouthwash gives you 24 hours of fresh breath confidence with just 2 rinses a day.
Smart Mouth is clinically proven to eliminate and prevent bad breath all day, and rinsing at night even stops morning breath.
Wow.
Give yourself the gift of holiday confidence with Smart Mouth. Find Smart Mouth at your favorite retailer or at smartmouth.com/radio.
My name is Sophie.
Sasha. Robert. Ron. And I'm alive thanks to my nurse practitioner.
My nurse practitioner saved me from a lifelong heart condition.
She prescribed the right medication.
My NP diagnosed my multi-organ failure.
My NP listens.
She saved my life twice, and I will always be grateful.
To learn why millions of people choose NPs, visit us at wechoosenps.org.
Paid for by AANP.
New on Curiosity Stream. Get ready for the best of the best with our 100 Days of Curiosity, featuring fan-favorite titles like Light on Earth with Sir David Attenborough. Join me on a journey like no other. Stephen Hawking's favorite places.
It's a crazy world out there.
The History of Home with Nick Offerman.
Not my home, just homes. Other people's homes.
And many more. It's 100 Days of Curiosity. And for a limited time, get 40% off our annual plan. That's just $1 a month. Visit CuriosityStream.com.
Any first responder will tell you never try to beat a train. After braking, it can take a mile for a train to completely stop. A mile. That's also how far a car can be dragged when a train hits it. So when you come to a rail crossing, stop, because trains can't. Paid for by NHTSA.
Bring home the love of a pet to your family this holiday. At the Petco Love Make More Merry Mega Adoption event this weekend, adoption fees are waived and special Petco offers. Find a participating shelter or Petco near you at mega-texas.com to adopt a pet.
The El Paso Community Foundation supports the causes you feel passionate about here in the borderland, whether it's education, social services, arts and culture, the environment, health, or economic development. The El Paso Community Foundation has been promoting philanthropy and progress in our hometown region for more than 45 years. Make your mark with us. Start a fund today. For good, for El Paso, forever. Learn more at epcf.org. That's epcf.org.
Guys, 2022's been a roller coaster year, so spoil her this Christmas by giving her the next best thing to wearing nothing at all with soft, silky, naturally nude pajamas exclusively from Pajamagram. Sensuous and smooth, naturally nude pajamas feel just like her own bare skin. Even more alluring than lingerie, the texture and touch of these pajamas is so seductive that you'll both love the feel of them. She'll love the feeling of wearing next to nothing at all, and you'll love the way they look. Best of all, Pajamagram does the wrapping for you with free gift packaging. Order today, and Pajamagram will also include a free matching naturally nude nightie with the purchase of naturally nude pajamas. That is free gift packaging and a free naturally nude nightie when you order today. Just go to Pajamagram.com. It's fast, easy, and delivery by Christmas is guaranteed. That's Pajamagram.com.
The podcast, The Bible in a Year with Jack Graham, is a moving and inspiring biblical audio experience that will help you master wisdom from the world's greatest book. In each episode, you'll learn to apply biblical principles to everyday life.
Each cinematic episode is a journey through the Bible's most profound stories that will strengthen your appreciation of the Word and inspire you to keep learning.
Listen to The Bible in a Year with Jack Graham on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I am your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages we're up on these days, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Oh, the comments that come in there are often entertaining. If you want to wade into it, you certainly can. Just know that click on the Facebook page, more or less the main one. Definitely one of the more contentious areas. I'm not going to say that we are the whole, never read the comments kind of section here, but better be ready to defend your point here, because if you think anything is just going to be taken by rote or appeals to authority or any of those other logical fallacies that like to get brought up here, you're not actually going to be talking about the issues. Probably not going to have that great of a time here, but hey, that's your choice. And we're going to keep talking about the things that affect us here in the borderland, discussing the issues. And if you just want to flame away, plenty of places on the internet to do that here. And there's one more thing I want to bring up here, aside from the many discussion points here, just in case it got missed here, that as of now, according to a release from Texas Governor Greg Abbott, we have a new district attorney here in El Paso at 4:11 p.m. received into our newsroom during our program today. Just quoting directly, Governor Greg Abbott has appointed Bill D. Hicks as the district attorney of the 34th Judicial District in Culberson, Hudspeth, and El Paso counties, effective 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on December 14th, 2022, for a term set to expire December 31st, 2024, until his successor shall be duly elected and qualified. So I think it's the replacement until then, since there is no election in between now and then. But interesting points to be made there, including in the actual statements, Governor Abbott saying that with over 2 decades of legal experience and a strong track record of public service, Bill Hicks is the ideal candidate to serve as district attorney for Texans in El Paso, Culberson, and Hudspeth counties. Interesting other point actually being made here. Another quote in this release from State Senator Cesar Blanco, notably a Democrat, saying, "I appreciate Governor Abbott's timely appointment of Judge Bill D. Hicks as the district attorney for the 34th Judicial District." Going on to say, "I've had conversations with Judge Hicks and with his more than 22 years of legal experience as a judge, assistant district attorney, and criminal and injury defense attorney, I am confident he will bring order, competence, and trust back to the district attorney's office while being a steward of the office for the people of El Paso, Culberson, and Hudspeth County. Therefore, I concur with this appointment." Not necessarily expecting that part to come as this, because I mean, really, this is entirely within the wheelhouse of the governor to make this appointment, but interesting that was actually also included in there as well. So with that much being said, a lot to talk about here today, and we want to make sure we get to those phone calls. So if you want to get on the line, full up at the moment, but that number to call is 915-544-5876, 544-KTSM. We do have David on the east side here with us right now on the line. David, thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Andrew, and thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, sure thing.
What I'd like to talk about this evening is, first of all, I'll give a little background. I'm more of a native to Louisiana. I'm just currently residing in Texas for currently serving in the armed forces. But,
well, thank you for your service.
So far, thank you, Andrew. And well, one thing I love about Texas is we here in Texas have enjoyment of the right of self-protection that a lot of people don't have all over the country, whereas we do as well in Louisiana. We have very similar gun laws. The reason why I wanted to hit on this today is because not only guns are like a hot topic in the news right now, but it's also it's the anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting. And I was just reading a article from New York Times saying that Texas goes permitless carry on guns and police faced an armed public. Now, this is the kind of negative publicity that's it's kind of plaguing the country right now. They have this idea that they blame the relaxed gun laws in certain states. That's the cause of crime. Now, Andrew, I'll go ahead and tell you, I openly carry my pistol everywhere in El Paso, where I'm legally allowed to, and nobody ever tells me anything. People still say hello. Nobody treats me different. And again, this is the way people should feel safe. Now, another thing I want to reiterate on is some people say, well, this is not the United States. If we're to be armed all the time and carry a gun for self-protection, because, the police, they can't be everywhere to protect you all the time. This is, like it or not, this is how this nation started. We started where we had to be on our guard all the time. And because we were on our guard and because we learned how to defend ourselves, we became this great nation. Now, I'm not gonna be one of those people to say that the public is getting soft. They need to toughen up. I mean, though a lot of people would agree with me, it's just everybody's letting their guard down. We've moved towards this new technocracy culture where we've kind of forgotten like simple things. Like, see, the Second Amendment, it guarantees every American to be a lawful combatant. It's that easy, plain and simple. That you're your own protector. Now, another thing I want to reiterate on was an El Paso police officer came up and talked to me when I was carrying my gun in a grocery store one day, and he started telling me he thanked me for what I was doing, because he said we can't be everywhere to protect you all the time. Especially now that like every day different people, just like what you were talking about with the investigative news reporter. We have so many people coming into this country. A lot of times we don't really know their background. We don't know what they're capable of. And it doesn't just have to be people coming into the country. We have people that were born here that are just as bad as any criminal that came from outside. So criminality is running rampant. And like one thing I want to just close with is that nobody should be afraid of somebody, who's armed in public, who is, simply just and another thing, I don't just arm myself for self-protection. It's more like a political. It's like a polite political statement, trying to tell people, hey, it's okay to be armed. The police around here do respect the Second Amendment. If you're not causing a nuisance, and say, just still talk to people, and I guarantee you, you'll get the same back. I'm not treated any different because I carry a gun. Everybody still treats me the same. People ask me about it. I tell them exactly what I'm telling you, Andrew, and they kind of leave like, okay, I understand this better. Because like it or not, everybody, when they're in trouble, they're going to call on somebody who has a gun. Whether anybody likes guns or not, they're always going to call upon somebody to defend them where they have a gun. Whether it's Joe Blow, who is lawfully trained on how to use a gun, or whether it's the police officer. Once again, if you don't like guns, you will always call on somebody to save you with a gun if you're ever in trouble. I guarantee you, and I dare somebody to prove me wrong.
I mean, yeah, there's a phrase that comes to mind there, that polite society is armed society. And I mean, even if you don't have it, I mean, the people who often say that, well, I don't really like carrying, but, a police officer doesn't fit in the pocket there. I mean, that is, I guess, a core idea of how, the country has progressed from, the frontier days, from the settler days, from the founding of this country, is from the idea of, you have to be that, danger could approach at any time, to this idea that we live in the modern age of more or less, civilized societies that kind of gets put forth, but there is a kind of underlying perception, underlying supposition of the force of arms behind it here when it comes to like law enforcement, like you're describing there. And given that there are situations like here in the city of El Paso, we have had it be not even just a discussion, but matter of public record in recent budget discussions about there not being enough police officers, for there wanting to be more of it. This has been reflected in previous times I've reported on it in the past about the actual response rates. Violent crime, sure, that very high priority. At the time, there were more or less like 9 or 10 different tiers of actual response. And if you weren't in like, the top 1 or 2 of the, urgency of it, it might take upwards of, 10 plus hours to actually end up getting out or seeing a police response. So that level of concern, I mean, that's been ongoing locally here, but to the general idea, I mean, it's not my choice to do the open carry, certainly as a part of your right here. Applaud you for taking the time to do it in a concerted and a thoughtful manner, because someone just going out there being like, oh yeah, anyone take me out with a Rambo mentality, I ain't got a lot of time for those kind of folks out there. But still encourage anyone, even with the permitless carry that we do have within the state of Texas now, to still take the time to get trained, educated, and practice with it, because just owning it is as much use as just owning any other implement or, say, a car. You're not actually trained, and I would argue should still probably seek licensure. Probably going to have not that great of a time if you ever actually end up having to use it, car or gun in that case here. But interesting perspective you bring there, including some of the ideas of the lawful combatants. So appreciate the point in the call. You have a good one there.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right. And with that, let's go ahead and squeeze in one more call before we hit that next break. We do have Barbara on the west side here with us right now. Barbara, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to start a short note on Bill Hicks. Mm-hmm. I know him, and he's a man of integrity, and he's loyal. He's wise. He's a dedicated father and husband, and he's a man of good character, and I'm proud that Governor Abbott appointed him as our DA. But I wanted to discuss the article that came out regarding Mayorkas' trip here to El Paso, and I want to push back on some of the things that were said. Mm-hmm. First, I don't normally do this, but I told the audience though that Mayorkas was going to come to accommodate things and not to resolve any issues, and that's exactly what he's done. So his solution, his accommodation for illegal immigration and the increase, is to divert commercial vehicles from the Bridge of the Americas to Isleta, which processes approximately 1,800 vehicles, commercial vehicles a day, then to Santa Teresa, which processes 460 vehicles a day. And then there's a comment from Escobar, our representative, that she said she told him, and I'm quoting, "This is very harmful and they need to find another option." Well, it was my understanding that she worked closely with the administration on all things related to illegal immigration. So I'm assuming from that comment that she wasn't there when they were proposing this proposition. But the article states, and I want to push back on this too, that they are scrambling, and I quote, to contain a growing crisis. Well, finally, they're admitting that it was and continues to be a crisis, but now it's out of hand. And then they're saying they're scrambling. I want to push back on that word, too. They're not scrambling. They are desperate. They're frantic. Better yet, they're frenetic to find a solution to a cataclysmic experimental failure that we and the world have been subjected to. And then they're looking for solutions. So I have something, and I'm quoting them. They could contain this growing crisis, that's their words, in my view, by implementing policies that were in effect before they came into office, respect and follow the law, secure our border, utilize Title VIII, and finally, do some legislative work. Find a legislative solution to finally settle this issue. And then Escobar further states that Abbott wants to break the border. Well, I guess she hasn't seen, but it's already broken. She and this administration have shattered our border. They've devastated lives. They've traumatized children. They've turned over the border to the cartels. And that's apparent when you hear read headlines, cartels fighting over migrants in Juarez. Armed men break into Juarez shelter, try to abduct migrants. And then those busloads of migrants that were delivered to El Paso on Sunday, I believe it was,
right.
They were some of the ones that were detained and had been abducted since December the 7th in Mexico.
Right.
Now, are these people that are being taken to these shelters that Mayorkas is proposing, and they keep them there for 2-3 months till their papers are pre-approved? So they're causing more danger all over the planet than anybody I know. And they've also allowed terrorists and criminals and pedophiles to come into our country. And they're silent. They've been silent from the beginning over the 45,000 unaccompanied children that are lost in the system. And they could be raped and are used in child trafficking, child labor. So Congresswoman needs to explain to us, the people of El Paso, because we're not stupid. How is it that Abbott wants to break an already non-existent border? And then the county states they've processed 18,800 illegal immigrants since October the 10th. Well, what was Governor Abbott's contribution to that? And then she says that she's asking the administration for short-term emergency shelters. Well, my question to that is, then what? I read an article, and it was dated 2019. There are 160 million people around the world that want to come into the United States of America. I'm wondering if she does any reading, if she's aware of that, because they sent the message out. Come to the USA, break the law, and you're in. She and this administration have opened the floodgates to assure destruction of our country. You know what? Denial and pointing the fingers at each other now isn't going to solve this monstrous situation which she and this administration created. She and this administration and the far left migration advocates found the path into this abyss. Now they need to find a way to climb out of it, because a lot of people are suffering because of their bad policies. And then regarding, do I have another minute? Samaniego.
Real quick, if you can, yeah.
That Abbott doesn't pay attention to El Paso. Well, I'm going to push back on that, because a few months ago, the Agostino said, remember they sent, I think, some National Guard, and the city didn't want them, so they were here one day and they left. I believe those were from Governor Abbott. Well, the Agostino said, even if we call a disaster, that we will be calling the shots. And here's Samaniego said today, well, we don't know if they'll impose everything on us. So he needs to they need to get together and have a consistent message, because one is saying we can call the shots and the other one is saying not. And one's saying that Abbott wants to break our border. I mean, how could he possibly, when all he's done is offer to help every city along the border, including El Paso? So this idea that he only pays attention to Democratic cities, well, do you remember the Haitian crisis?
Yeah,
remember
of course.
I mean, they are being inundated over there more than we were, but now it's our turn. So they need to pay attention and quit spending our money and being stubborn about it and trying to tell us that that Governor Abbott does not care about it. That is so false. And
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of problems that led up to. I mean, there's no one thing I feel like we can point to that led to this situation, except kind of consistent. I feel like we talked about this a lot of times here. Messaging problems about whether it's full-throated, don't come here. I mean, I think Mayorkas said similar-ish things during his recent visits here, as has been reported on by, KTEP and the El Paso Times, or our news partners there at KFox 14, about how people need to know they can't come. But if that message is not actually being brought to the people that are trying to come here, is that so much a purposeful statement, so much that as a wishful thinking? Because we're not talking about where the rubber hits the road, where these statements actually go into action, what comes from it. We're going to keep facing this kind of a situation here, at least in the short term, hopefully not the long, but that one, given the very myriad circumstances and those countdowns that are very much being thought about, there's a couple of questions about what that will actually take and what that will actually look like if we don't. So that is so much to say that, again, I don't really see except for massive amounts of resources and frankly presence at the border. And even then, I think that might just be continuing. You brought up a point earlier that I really wanted to make sure, and this kind of ties into it, about returning to previous policies. I'm not sure even if the administration wanted to return to, say, the MPP, Migrant Protection Protocol, so-called Remain in Mexico policies, that would be on the table anymore. Whether it becomes logistically possible, because we are talking about, as there has been literally a couple thousand showing up daily in our region of the border, if that would be possible to kind of push back on that. Again, the humanitarian issues, whether it's on this side or on the other side of the border, still are very serious and not to be ignored. But also whether there's essentially an appetite. That was one of the other questions. Again, I wish I'd been a part of that interview, be able to play the whole thing for you when it came to what Mayorkas did say when he was here in town. But some of those humanitarian questions and the appetite of Mexico to still essentially play ball was a very serious one. And he says, well, they're still our partners and willing to work with us in various ways. My paraphrasing, not his exact words, but I just don't see that working out anymore. There's got to go back to the drawing board and essentially start from scratch, and we're not really in the position for that to be the solution right now. We got to deal with, as much as short-term thinking as I think part of what has gotten us into this situation, we got short-term seriousness that needs to be dealt with now in our region, in our area, and probably along the rest of the entire border sectors as we get closer to next Wednesday and that anticipated end of Title 42 and all the implications that come with it. But the long-term can't be neglected at the same time either, because this is not the result of, oh, hey, I heard about this coming up next week. You want to take advantage of this from either the coyotes, the cartels, or any of the people involved with this. So, yeah, that's so much to say. There's no real simple answers to this, but something needs to be starting working on. I guess I'm appreciative of the fact that we've gotten over this whole, are we calling it a crisis or not, kind of part of it. I guess I can kind of see the idea of Abbott trying to break the border, at least the rhetoric from it, as, I mean, the whole idea of the random inspections coming with the trucks does kind of bring up specters of what happened earlier when there was the enhanced inspections of all trucks that pretty much shut down cross-border traffic. I don't know if it's necessarily fair to call it breaking the border, but I can see the rhetorical link they're trying to make there. But point of the matter is, without a lot of response being mounted, and the generosity of El Pasoans in dealing with this has been very much forward. So if you've got charitable things or organizations that you'd like to support, please consider reaching out and finding what is needed, because we're going to be having, if there's not a lot done, as has been brought up here, a lot of human suffering in our region. And again, that's more the short-term part of it, though. There has to still continuously be the pressure put on to make sure that this is dealt with without it here. So thank you for the point in the call, Barbara. Do appreciate it.
Can't possibly be, we have to push back. This can't possibly be the point of no return. We can't get there. We're close, but we can't continue this path.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe we're there, but without something being done, I don't see this improving in the short, medium, or longer term either.
Correct.
All right,
the administration will take care of that, God willing.
All right. Well, thanks for the point in the call. Do appreciate it. And with that, we got to take that next break right now. Kind of blowing up our breaks today, but hey, we'll try to come back with the bottom of the hour news break and all that, and get to more calls on the line here. One quick other comment I want to get to. Ion Grimm asking, what do you think was accomplished by Mayorkas' visit? Anything productive, or just a lot of hot air and show? I don't know of anything productive. It's probably too early to tell if there's been anything productive. I guess it'll really come with about the idea of resources being brought here, both monetarily and at this point, I don't think money is enough. We need physical resources, whether it be actual staffing, whether it be, has been brought up, National Guard, the idea of it to deal with the actual just physical needs being dealt with here, or material, goods, okay, this is much, if this is truly going to end up being prelude to what might be start happening next Wednesday. And again, I don't see much of a deviation from that potential at this point, because even if there is to be serious policy changes happening at this point, I don't know how much that course can be moved off. It's a question of, gravitational pull at this point, practically, with all of the impetus and the marketing from the cartels that has gone behind this. So that's a long way to say, I think time will tell, but I don't have many concrete things I can point to at this point about accomplishments. I'm hoping I'm wrong about this. I don't want this to be the situation that we're in, or that we are going to be potentially even having more thousands continue to show up in this region, because the amount of stress that it's putting on, not even just the NGOs and local officials, but those on the front lines of this, Border Patrol, CBP, ICE, federal authorities, probably have more three letters than we even know about involved in this, probably getting pulled in. That much was said, and statements were made about more resources being brought to the area, like from nearby regions. But that can only happen, other resources being brought in the same vein of, Department of Homeland Security, DHS, CBP, ICE, etc., if those areas aren't also seeing the same issues, same levels, etc. So I think just there might need to be more being done, and I almost got to wonder if we're going to reach a level. I don't know if there's a willingness from the administration to declare a disaster, but I hope we don't get to those levels, but don't see it necessarily being impossible at this point in time. Again, if this is all just prelude. Anyway, got to take that next break right now. Coming out of this break, I'll be talking more about these issues and a whole lot more, so stay tuned. More Talk El Paso here on News Radio 690 KTSM.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
On the I-10 westbound from the Hunter Viscount exit past the Patriot to Copia, it's a 10-minute delay. I-10 eastbound Trans Mountain over to the Patriot, a 13-minute delay. On the spur, eastbound between the 54 Gateway and the Loop, they're looking at a 12-minute backup. Global Reach, half-hour delays from the spur down to Montana Avenue. And a semi is blocking the left lane, Americas Avenue southbound at North Loop Drive. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Hello, I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update. 3 people were seriously hurt today after a Sun Metro bus collided with a car. The crash left the bus resting on its side on Gateway South at Yandell. Traffic was diverted to Tularosa around the wreckage and emergency situation. El Paso police report 3 people went to the hospital but didn't say in which vehicle they were riding. The Texas Department of Public Safety will begin to conduct random commercial vehicle safety inspections at the ports of entry along the border. DPS made that announcement yesterday, and officials say the inspections will be done at random on the commercial vehicles as they cross into Texas. The governor had ordered the inspections before in April that instructed DPS to increase inspections for all commercial vehicles coming into the country. And passenger flights will resume at Las Cruces International Airport for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Advanced Airlines will offer passenger air service from Las Cruces to Albuquerque starting January 16th. I'm Erica Castillo with this KFOX 14 News Update.
From the CBS Forewarned Weather Center, I'm forecaster Vani Castillo. Well, we are definitely in for a much colder day here in the borderlands, looking at a high of 50 degrees in El Paso, 48 in Las Cruces, and that wind that we're seeing definitely making it feel a lot colder. We are looking at 15 to 20 mile per hour winds, so we are taking a break from those very strong winds, but it is still going to be a breezy day. We are expecting to continue to see these cooler temperatures lasting throughout the rest of the week.
This report is sponsored by Petco Love. Add the love of a pet at mega-texas.com. Bring home the love of a pet to your family this holiday. At the Petco Love Make More Merry Mega Adoption event this weekend, adoption fees are waived and special Petco offers. Find a participating shelter or Petco near you at mega-texas.com to adopt a pet.
Is it getting harder to find new customers? After all, it's one thing to run a business and another to grow it. But what if you had access to everyone listening to me right now? Access to all the customers in your area. As the #1 audio company in America, iHeartMedia gives you access to all the customers you need to grow at a fraction of the cost of digital, video, and social advertising. Get started today. From your cell, dial pound 250 and say keyword great results. That's pound 250 and say great results.
Mario Cordy Lopez here with a fresh breath tip for the holidays.
We all love the parties, friends and family, but up close moments can be awkward.
Yeah, they can. Smart Mouth mouthwash gives you 24 hours of fresh breath confidence with just 2 rinses a day.
Smart Mouth is clinically proven to eliminate and prevent bad breath all day, and rinsing at night even stops morning breath. Mouth.
Wow.
Give yourself the gift of holiday confidence with SmartMouth. Find SmartMouth at your favorite retailer or at smartmouth.com/radio.
It can happen easily. A few drinks become a few too many. It's time to go, and you think of calling for a ride home. Now, what's the worst that can happen? You get pulled over, you lose your license, you total your car, you kill someone, drive sober, or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
My son Finn was born with congenital heart disease and spent the first 8 months of his life in the hospital. Starlight Children's Foundation has played an important role in our lives. For 5 weeks as a baby, Finn lived in a Starlight Hero wagon instead of having to sleep in a hospital bed. Starlight provides moments of joy for families like mine at a time where there's very little to be found. Learn more about how Starlight brightens the lives of sick kids by visiting starlight.org today.
It can happen easily. A few drinks become a few too many. It's time to go, and you think of calling for a ride home. Now, what's the worst that can happen? You get pulled over, you lose your license, you total your car, you kill someone, drive sober, or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
New on Curiosity Stream. Meet the man who dove deep and changed modern nautical engineering and warfare forever on John Philip Holland, inventor of the submarine. And in 200 AD, before modern medicine, a Chinese doctor performed life-saving surgeries. How'd he do it? And how has surgery evolved since? It's the new series, The Past, Present, and Future. Watch now on Curiosity Stream. And for a limited time, get 40% off our annual plan. That's just $1 a month. Visit curiositystream.com.
This report is sponsored by Petco Love. Add the love of a pet at mega-texas.com. Bring home the love of a pet to your family this holiday. At the Petco Love Make More Merry Mega Adoption event this weekend, adoption fees are waived and special Petco offers. Find a participating shelter or Petco near you at mega-texas.com to adopt a pet.
Hey Texas! This time of year is all about coming together and enjoying time-honored holiday traditions or starting your own. This winter, make sure your fellow Texans, especially those with a serious mental health condition, know how to stay informed and protected from increased COVID-19 risks associated with serious mental illness. Getting vaccinated is pro-Texan protection against COVID-19. Visit www.vaccines.gov/search to find a vaccine provider near you.
Any first responder will tell you never try to beat a train. After braking, it can take a mile for a train to completely stop. A mile. That's also how far a car can be dragged when a train hits it. So when you come to a rail crossing, stop, because trains can't. Paid for by NHTSA.
Dell Technologies' Days of Deals start now with savings on select business PCs powered by 12th Gen Intel Core processors. Call a Dell Technologies advisor at 877-ASK-DELL. That's 877-ASK-DELL.
This report is sponsored by Dell Technologies.
El Paso's News Radio 690 KTSM.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, call 915-544-KTSM or follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso, airing live on News Radio 690 KTSM. I'm your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thank you for tuning in, however you may be doing so, be it on air, online, live, streaming through the free and reliable iHeartRadio app, or joining us over on the various social media pages, facebook.com/Talk El Paso, the Talk El Paso channel over on YouTube, Twitter at Talk El Paso, or twitch.tv, Andrew J. Polk. Blown up some of the breaks here today, but still back on track and talking about all the things affecting us here. Just a couple of them. The immigration and border security situation that is not even just dominating local headlines, but nationally as well, as we are still on the course that countdown to the end of Title 42 anticipated, and whatever comes within it. Still a lot to be dealt with here, and a lot of responses happening to that. A lot of people commenting on that, dropping those likes and reacts that we do appreciate over on our social media pages, including Matt Olson, Amber Banda, David Dotrieve, Linda Thompson Dales, James Holmes, Ion Graham, Robert Hange, Richard Janasik, and why does it cut off the list there sometimes? We appreciate Robbie Flores, Monica Cervantes, and Ida Beza Gardner, among others, do appreciate it here, as well as RJ saying that we need Remain in Mexico, and AMLO needs to stop busing them to the border, stop incentivizing immigrants to come here. Again, I'm not sure that going back to any previous policy is really going to do it, even Title 42 on its own, because I mean, there's a whole analogy being made about, horse left the barn here, and sure, maybe putting it back in place might close it, but I don't know if that's going to affect, at the very least, the short term. And frankly, given as much as the communication is absolutely having to be a part of this, whatever our policies are in place, if that is not being clearly communicated to the constituent populations we're talking about, including the cartels, like, don't forget that they need to be told here that if it's not, frankly, I think it needs to be something new at this point. So there's been rumblings about this potentially coming from the Biden administration. I mean, some local expectation, though, that has been falling by the wayside since we're now in the situation that we are, but there's a whole lot more to come. And just the one other thing I want to make sure we mention, since it's happening in the midst of our show here, we do have a new district attorney appointed for El Paso. Former El Paso Judge Bill D. Hicks has now been appointed for the term to serve through 2024. So, yeah, there's a lot more. There's way too much. And an election going on. Sure, you can't vote today, but you can vote coming up Saturday. Oh, there's too damn much to squeeze into 2 hours, but we're doing the best we can. So let's get back to those phone lines, get a little bit more response before we get to the end of the show today. We do have Raul in the Northeastern line with us here right now. Raul, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Andrew. Barbara the Trumper sounds like a broken record, for what her comments and opinions are worth. You regularly say that after my calls, but I haven't heard you say that after her same old song. Illegal immigration, Biden bad, Trump tremendous. Hey, Barb, your failed Fuhrer of fools, Trump, had control of all the federal government for 2 years and failed to deal with the systemic problems that cause a constant flow of illegal aliens into the United States. He didn't build much wall. He didn't get Mexico to pay for the wall. He didn't round up and deport the 11 million people working illegally in the country like he said he would. And in fact, the government never had the capabilities to do that. So he was scamming the American people again. Now, today, President Biden used the 10th anniversary of the Sandy Hook school shootings to urge lawmakers to pass legislation banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines similar to those used in the shooting. Now, 20 young children and 6 school staff were killed with a nut with a gun. And we got lots of nuts in America. A lot of them voted for Trump. An assault weapon in the hands of an incited, racist, xenophobic Trump terrorist killed 23 people in El Paso. Gun massacre deaths dropped during the assault weapons ban and increased after its expiration. Gun massacres fell 37% while the ban was in place and rose 183% after the ban expired. Just like gun deaths increased when goofy Governor Greg Abbott passed the permitless carry law. Now, Andrew, if the founders wanted unfettered access to weapons, why doesn't the Second Amendment solely and only read the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but in fact is qualified by the opening language of the Second Amendment being a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. Now,
I'm aware of what you say there and the question you're asking me there about the idea that that is an informing and therefore it's in sponsorship or defense of the state is the question you keep coming up with it here. And as much as I say for what it's worth, because I'll definitely agree with your ability to say certain things, if I don't find myself agreeing with them, and most people I don't necessarily agree with either, but they're not usually flaming other people as the part of it here. So maybe decorum is a part of it to answer your other question. But to the idea of, shall not be infringed. Again, subordinate clause, as much as we're doing the whole grammatical argument here, which I really do hate when it comes down to, because we're not actually talking about the substance of things. I mean, there are important things to note about both coming from the actual, Articles of Confederation, the way it had been put there, the way they were therefore refined when it came to the Constitution and the amendments, the Bill of Rights that then went within it, and as well as the Federalist Papers that do some supporting documentation around these concepts, because government overreach was absolutely a concern happening for the founding generation, in as much as the revolution could be, at least at the start of it, essentially a protest against government overreach. I mean, the entire idea of standing armies that's written about by the founding generation is something that was very much put into place by, the British government at the time, the king, George III, all those good people and names that come along with it. And again, the real question comes down to it is that when this law was put into place, and the amendment that therefore the laws flow from, they had not just finished fighting against deer or, petty robbers. They would very much been fighting against a world-class power, that a ragtag army. I mean, there's a phrase out there that God loves and protects children, drunks in the United States of America, because some of those things, including the famous George Washington, crossing of the river, that super should not have worked, but somehow it did. Like, tactically, that engagement, Americans, we will kill you on your sleep on Christmas. No, seriously, we've done it. Yeah, that was essentially what was going on there. But to be more specific with it, in the local circumstances we're dealing with here, I mean, if you want to talk about why didn't the previous administration do it here, I mean, that's a pretty decent question to be asked about right now. I mean, these immigration situations have not essentially ceased or been decreasing at any point over, let's just call it, the last couple of decades. Sure, there may have been lulls, but we've been seeing since coming up on the better part of 10 years now, since I really pointed as 2014 as where it was, and I'm sure things were changing before then, that there were adjustments, changes, the whole unaccompanied minor crisis that was going at that point in time. And it seems at least every 2 years we have a new crisis, a new shift, a new change, a new something necessitating changes. And yet the legislative willingness or the administrative willingness to put the pressure on the legislative actually see it through has been lacking, because seriously, there have been no new laws passed, regardless of the administration. So you can go back to just after Reagan if you really want to be yelling about this. But the fact of the matter is that there has been no willingness to see this done here. So if you're going to put the blame solely on one administration, I mean, yeah, there's justification for why they didn't be unhappy with them, why they didn't do that, and a number of other things that we've talked about previously. But if we're just going to say, therefore, they didn't do anything and no one else has done anything wrong, I think you're missing more than a little bit of a point there. So does that make sense for what it's worth?
Yeah, I didn't say that. Now, some gun nuts think that that guns in citizens' hands are to protect them from the U.S. government. Now, that's really crazy. These nuts thinking that they could take on the U.S. military. And if that's the case, Andrew, then let me ask you, how lethal a weaponry should people be able to own in order to take on Uncle Sam's military? You think people should be able to own bazookas, right?
I mean, again, we've gone around this merry-go-round before. If you got a good link for me to, let me know. But seriously, if you're just going to say that there's more lethal weaponry, the government could nuke us tomorrow, therefore there has just to be acquiescence to it, that there's nothing else to be done. I mean, seriously, that is not even just a morally bankrupt argument, but literally has been disproven. Look at the two major conflicts that the U.S. has lost with the full force of the military, not even just domestic, put out of here, Taliban and the Viet Cong. Those were two conflicts in which there was supposedly disorganized, supposedly, farmer levels, and even in the withdrawal from Afghanistan, that was U.S.-supported, U.S.-provided weaponry that ended up being completely ineffective. So if you're just going to say, yeah, well, there's nothing else to be done, they can blow us up anytime they choose, why should we even bother about it? That is not so much supported by reality. Now, to make this 100% clear, both disagree with the Viet Cong and the Taliban in their very essence of it. I mean, there's arguments to be made when it came to Vietnam that was a revolution we were interrupting, and that the intervention of it there was, there's a whole lot of historical analysis more than we can get into one show there. But the entire idea that, well, there's nothing we can do, the government is too powerful, therefore we should just acquiesce to it, is not in the spirit of this country when we're talking about arms or not. And to be very clear, the Constitution does not mention guns or any specific weapons. It mentions arms in general, because the idea of the citizenry being dispossessed of the ability to either defend themselves from enemies, foreign and domestic, as is suggested there, is not within the spirit nor the foundation of this country. Anyway, appreciate the point in the call for what it's worth, because, again, I do appreciate it, even though if I don't find myself having a lot of points of agreement lately. Let's take one more call at least before we end up getting towards the end of this program here. We do have Andrew on the west side here with us right now. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Reference Mayorkas' visit and his comments to the news media.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely going nowhere. The rhetoric needs to cease. First of all, this invitation by Biden early in his presidency, telling people to come in. Number two, Chuck Schumer saying he wants to give the illegal immigrants in this country pathway to citizenship, or make them U.S. citizens. Mm-hmm. This type of comments are resonating worldwide, and it's encouraging more people to come in. We also need to encourage Mexico to close and enforce their southern border. That's where they're coming through.
I mean, that has been one of the conversation points. I mean, we've seen over just heck the time we've been on this program and dealing with it, in not today, but in the span of it, seeing some differences. I mean, we've talked previously about the whole change that the Mexican National Guard, La Guardia Nacional, saw themselves doing to become essentially be reformed as a border security force. They were at points deployed here to the southern part of the U.S.-Mexico border, again, south of the border on their part of it, and also different things being set up on, like, their borders with, Guatemala, Belize, and the routes coming from Central and South America. So that has previously been in place, but there's been several different phrases used for it. Anti-migration permissiveness. Again, some of the reporting even going on from national news sources, including like the New York Times and the Washington Post, on what was being done the videos that we saw of the buses approaching Juarez. That led to the initiation of this current situation we are in right now. The surge, I think is the best way to put it, that I've heard described so far, is that they were being escorted by authorities. It looked like more or less state level police, if I'm not mistaken, looking at the vehicles that were there, but they were also given authorizations, kind of going back to the old form of, as long as you don't stop here, as long as you don't become our problem, because it's worth noting that Mexican immigration policies are fairly stringent in what it takes to actually be recognized there. So the temporary authorization, very much in the vein of, as long as you keep moving, we don't care about it. Just make sure you don't actually stop here, as more or less official policy. And this seems to be a return to form, even if it's taking on slightly new formats.
Yes, I agree. Well, it could be also that somebody is greasing those politicians south of the border. But with that, I wanted to comment on what Comrade Raul said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just remember, Raul, that the Second Amendment, according to the Constitution, is an individual right. Read District of Columbia versus Heller. It's there. And you want to talk about people defending themselves against tyranny, government? Well, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 1944. Those Jewish individuals, they held out longer than France did against the Nazis.
Interesting comparison you're making there. Of course, not at the time of the founding generation, that being in place, but a more modern example you're talking about there, the Warsaw Uprising, as well as many of those other kind of things. I mean, those are some of that time period. World War II is where a lot of the illusions ended up coming about the idea of why to never be dispossessed of your arms because of what can happen if it doesn't there. Now, I don't totally take the analysis that anything that we're approaching is going to be near that, but I will say that anytime we start getting closer to the idea that there's no reason for anyone to have an arm, I mean, that there is a level of argument there, but also starts ending up being a complete misunderstanding of what life is for people who don't live in the exact same situation as the people who are often making those statements.
Yes, well, I don't advocate any insurgency or anything like
absolutely.
that. But the first thing Hitler did with the Nuremberg laws, he confiscated all privately owned arms, and look what happened. What happened later on when Germany was on defeat, was about to be defeated? He had to arm the civilian population again to fight for the country. Look, just two examples of citizens owning arms. But anyway, one of the biggest tragedies going further back, 1814. We talk about January 6th, which I don't condone it, and the people responsible should be prosecuted.
Absolutely.
But the worst act of violence against the U.S. government was in 1814 when the British burned the presidential mansion, now known as the White House, and they burned the Capitol building.
Yep, War of 1812. That is a not often remembered part of the fact that there's some people who say out there like, the U.S. has never been invaded, never lost a war on our territory, those kind of things. But yeah, there absolutely has been times when we've been invaded. I mean, the entire, the white to their eyes phrase that sometimes gets used from the, Battle of New Orleans that happened, ironically enough, a month after the conflict had technically ended. I mean, there's a whole lot of illusions. And the fact that the matter is that, I mean, we have, from a caller from the start of the show, actually, saying that I'm not going to say people have grown soft, but there have been a lot of times when people take for granted the idea that peace and tranquility is a given, and that doesn't take a lot of work on the individual level to keep that up and going, because we haven't seen that kind of upheaval on this continent within more or less living memory.
Well, one last thing concerning what you just said. You wanna talk about people being hate for the United States? Read this, or provoking other countries against the United States. Read the Zimmerman telegram.
Yeah, referring to the interesting note sent from, and this is something we definitely talked about on the history program, not to mix our P's and Q's here, but that's a fascinating one about the intrigue that was going on right in this area. Pancho Villa and some of the, German double and even triple agents that came right through our area as they were trying to keep the U.S. out of World War, or the Great War, World War I, as we call it now, or just them entangled and not putting as many resources there. Fascinating spy networks that came through here. But yeah, the Zimmerman notes, as you're also referencing there, a fascinating one. Definitely a interesting part of our local history.
Correct. In other words, Germany was trying to provoke Mexico into starting a war with the United States. Anyway, have a good evening. I know you're short on time. Take care.
I appreciate the point in the call. You have a good one there.
Sure.
All right, and with that, we got to take that last break right now. So coming out of this break, we'll mention a couple other things that we got coming up for you, as well as some more of the plans as we get towards the end of the year. So stay tuned. More Talk El Paso after this break here on News Radio 690 KTSM. Don't go anywhere.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 eastbound at the Airway exit. Look out, you got a crash that's blocking the right lane on Americas Avenue, southbound at Alameda. A crash there is blocking 2 right lanes. And I-10 westbound is slow. Hunter Viscount to the Patriot with 7-minute delays. 16-minute delays on the I-10 eastbound from Trans Mountain to the Patriot. And Montana Avenue eastbound Trowbridge to Joe Battle, 10-minute delays. Carrie Edwards, El Paso traffic.
This report is sponsored by Petco Love and the love of a pet at mega-texas.com. Make your holidays more merry. Adopt a pet during Petco Loves Texas Mega Adoption Event at participating animal shelters and Petco stores this weekend. Even merrier, all adoption fees are waived. Visit mega-texas.com to adopt a pet.
Guys, 2022's been a roller coaster year, so spoil her this Christmas by giving her the next best thing to wearing nothing at all with soft, silky, naturally nude pajamas exclusively from Pajamagram. Sensuous and smooth, naturally nude pajamas feel just like her own bare skin. Even more alluring than lingerie, the texture and touch of these pajamas is so seductive that you'll both love the feel of them. She'll love the feeling of wearing next to nothing at all, and you'll love the way they look. Best of all, Pajamagram does the wrapping for you with free gift packaging. Order today, and Pajamagram will also include a free matching naturally nude nightie with the purchase of naturally nude pajamas. That is free gift packaging and a free naturally nude nightie when you order today. Just go to Pajamagram.com. It's fast, easy, and delivery by Christmas is guaranteed. That's Pajamagram.com.
It can happen easily. A few drinks become a few too many. It's time to go, and you think of calling for a ride home. Now, what's the worst that can happen? You get pulled over, you lose your license, you total your car, you kill someone, drive sober, or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
My son Finn was born with congenital heart disease and spent the first 8 months of his life in the hospital. Starlight Children's Foundation has played an important role in our lives. For 5 weeks as a baby, Finn lived in a Starlight Hero wagon instead of having to sleep in a hospital bed. Starlight provides moments of joy for families like mine at a time where there's very little to be found. Learn more about how Starlight brightens the lives of sick kids by visiting starlight.org today.
It can happen easily. A few drinks become a few too many. It's time to go, and you think of calling for a ride home. Now, what's the worst that can happen? You get pulled over, you lose your license, you total your car, you kill someone, drive sober, or get pulled over. Paid for by NHTSA.
El Pasoans Fighting Hunger and iHeartRadio have teamed up again to bring back the Buy the Box campaign this year to help those in need in our community this holiday season and beyond. Please consider donating during this most generous time of the year with your organization to Buy the Box. You'll not only be helping your neighbors right in our community to fight hunger, but you'll also be able to boost your business with a complimentary iHeartRadio advertising campaign. For details and to learn more, go to elpasoansfightinghunger.org. That's elpasoansfightinghunger.org/BUY the box.
News Radio 690 KTSM El Paso.
Live from the KTSM AM 690 studios, it's Talk El Paso with Andrew J. Polk. To be a part of the show, follow on Facebook at facebook.com/Talk El Paso. Now here's your host, Andrew J. Polk.
Thank you all so very much for joining us here for Talk El Paso. I've been your host, Andrew J. Polk. Thanks for tuning in, however you may have been doing so, be it on air, online. Super out of time here for this show. So a couple things you want to say. A, you don't know what the Zimmerman note is. I mean, just say that. Don't try to make a grand allusions to the idea of invasion or things like that. We're talking about 1917 and historical fact there. So educate yourself before you make a fool of yourself, though. If you're into that kind of thing, not here to kink shame, but hey, talking about things you know about is definitely a better way to look here. In any case, that's going to do it for us today. A couple things coming up for you, including more on the local election, because yes, it's happening. You know, I can't ignore that as much as the other big things are going on. So we're going to be having on some more of the, not quite closing out, more of the coverage here, but going to be having on specifically Art Fierro, candidate for District 6, because we weren't able to get him on beforehand. So that's going to do it for us today. Out of time. Stay safe out there. Look twice for motorcycles when out on the road, and have a great evening, y'all. We'll see you tomorrow.
Traffic all day. News Radio 690.
I-10 eastbound at the Airway exit. Look out, you got a crash that's blocking the right lane on Americas Avenue, southbound at Alameda. A crash there is blocking 2 right lanes. I-10 westbound is slow. Hunter Viscount to the Patriot with 7-minute delays. 16-minute delays on the I-10 eastbound from Trans Mountain to the Patriot. And Montana Avenue eastbound Trowbridge to Joe Battle, 10-minute delays. Kerry Edwards, El Paso traffic.
Portions of the following program were pre-recorded.
NBC News